Yay. Good morning. Welcome everyone to the Supplemental Retirement Board of Trustees meeting, February 24th at 9 a.m. I want to thank Patty and Jeff and Tom and all their staff who are here today, and Ted Brand, Chief of Staff, is here. So we're going to call the meeting to order. We'll welcome everybody to the meeting. We'll have a public comment section at the end that individuals can address the board later in the agenda. And continuing with our initiative to increase government transparency, that our department has established a policy to record audio and video official meetings like this one and make recordings available on our website. It's important to increase transparency and accessibility of public meetings that fall under the authority of DST. And as such, our meeting will be recorded. Because of this, because we have some board members who are attending by phone or by GoToMeeting, we will be using the following procedures. We'll call a roll call for votes. Without objection, anybody who makes a motion or a second will be considered a yes vote for efficiency purposes. If you leave the meeting at any time, please announce your departure and announce your return as well. Please state your name before speaking so that we can get that recorded in the meeting minutes. And finally, any text or other recorded communications between board members during the meeting, even on personal cell phones, are deemed to be public records to the extent they concern the issues of the meeting. As a reminder, please mute your phone and turn off the video feature until you need to speak. This will help limit background noise and outside distractions. And your cooperation in that is very much appreciated. So with that, Mr. Secretary, you call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Here.
Shavella Thomas.
Present.
Lorraine Johnson.
Present.
James Lumsden.
Here.
Melinda Barron.
Here.
Michael Lewis. Nels Roseland. Stephen Bean.
Here.
Wyndon Hippler.
Here.
Thank you all. I think we missed on the agenda, but if you'll stand and join us for our Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our Ethics Act members, we have an agenda that's before you. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to review the agenda. Please take a moment to further review it, determine if anyone present has an actual potential or the appearance of a conflict of interest regarding the matters that are before us. Hearing none, we'll count James being present. Good morning, James. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December 2nd.
So moved, Melinda Barron.
Second, sir.
Thank you. Motion is second being made. Any further discussion about approval of the meeting? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Shavella Thomas.
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson.
Aye.
James Lumsden.
Aye.
Michael Lewis. Nels Roseland.
Aye.
Second. Steve Bean
Aye.
and Wyndon Hippler.
Aye.
Thank you all. We're already in item 4, which is administrative matters, and turn it over to Jeff Hancock, Director of Supplemental Retirement. Jeff.
Thank you, Treasurer. Well, as you all are aware, in our December 2nd meeting of the board approved us to cut our fee in half from where it was. And so following the meeting and in accordance with our policies, we posted the new fee rule on the web for 30 days to receive our comments. There have been no comments received. And so the last action at this point in time is for the board to formally adopt the new fee rule. And once the fee rule is adopted, that fee will go into effect March 1st of this year.
Thank you. And are we connected as far as the PR associated with this? Public relations? Make sure you connect with Frank. With that, members, congratulations. Thank you for operationalizing this time, Jeff and others. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to lower the fees since there's been no public objection to doing that.
Shavella Thomas, I move.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I'll second, sir.
Okay, a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell,
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson. Lorraine Johnson,
Aye.
James Lumsden,
Aye.
Linda Barron. Michael Lewis. Steve Beam
Aye.
and Wyndon Hibbler.
Aye.
Great. Next, I'm going to give a brief update on the 2021 audit and a few comments regarding the NC3 4B program. For those of you who are not part of the audit subcommittee, on February the 14th, we held our kickoff meeting for the 2021 SRP audit with Clifton Larson Allen, who was our auditor. The audit will follow the same methodology as it has in prior years. One change I did want to note is the audit partner this year is going to be Jason Ostrowski, as Tom Ray has left the firm of Clifton Larson Allen. Jason does have extensive experience with public plans, and he actually was on our engagement a number of years ago prior to Tom Ray. The request list has been received from Clifton Larson Allen, and that is in process. And many of those items that we can submit have already been collected and submitted. There'll probably be a focus this year on some of the new GASB reporting rules, as well as some of the COVID distribution handling that was part of the CARES Act during the 2021 year. So that's it for the the brief audit update, unless there's any questions from anyone on that.
Any questions from the board members? For Jeff?
Okay, in terms of the 403B program, a discontinuation, I have been sending out periodic updates to the board to kind of keep everyone apprised of what our efforts are and the progress we've been making thus far, along with some milestone dates that we have set. I hope you guys are finding that information useful. And again, thus far, we've done our first round of communications. We've sent out letters to both the employers as well as participants. We've created a set of frequently asked questions. We have those posted to our websites. We have the notices posted to our websites as well. We've been working on the employer election form that all of the employers are going to be required to complete to let us know what their direction is in terms of whether they're going to continue their 403B plan or whether they're going to terminate that plan. So that is moving along well, and that is almost finalized. We're starting on our second round of letters to both the employers as well as the participants. Again, we have website messaging up on the plan sponsor website as well as the participant transactional website. Matt Herman, who's here with us today, him and his team at Prudential have been doing some great work in regards to outreach to employers, and I'm going to let Matt share those efforts, as again, his team has been doing a lot of good work. So I'm going to pause here, see if there's any questions for me before we turn things over to Prudential and allow them to continue the update.
This is Melinda. Jeff, I've noticed since we made that decision, we've gotten a lot of national attention across the board in the financial publications and so forth. But what I'm more interested in is the local folks. Have we gotten any negative feedback from it?
So we really have not gotten any negative feedback. And I think Matt can also share during his update some of the feedback that they received from some of our employers as they've engaged with them. But really no negative feedback at all.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Jeff from the board members? All right, well, we'll go ahead and bring Prudential up for item number 5, and they can share with us the administrative update.
Great to be back, Mike McCann and Matt Herman. And following on Jeff's comments, we're going to have Matt go first today to continue the 403B update, and then he'll give an update on the great work of his retirement education counselor team. And then I'll finish off today with an administrative update. Thank you, Mike.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here this morning. Great to be in person. And there's a lot to cover today. So as Mike mentioned, I'll cover some updates on last year. We had a really strong year. Provide some updates on insights, things we're seeing on the employer and the employee level. We've got some special initiatives going on, but first we jump into 403B. A lot of great work has taken place up to this point. So thank you, Jeff, to you and your team, Alan, Reed, Tom, I know Zora back there, Zora, Christy. We're in heavy communication mode. There's a lot of good stuff out there to support employers and employees. As Jeff mentioned, we are also doing a lot of outreach to employers right now to assist them. Just to give you some perspective on the impacts of this change, we have about 75 employers who offer the 403B, have funds, participant accounts. When you start to dissect those 75, one of the questions, Melinda, about impacts and questions, you start to look at the impacts at an employer level. While there are 75 plans, you look at the top 5, those top 5 plans account for about 65% of the participant accounts. The top 5 403B employers have 923 participants of the 1,400 in this plan total. You expand that population a little bit larger, you go to top 10, they have 1,140 participants, or about 80%. So while there are 75 plans, the impact, the concentration of those accounts really reside in a small number of plans. Of course, there are 75, and one of the things we decided to do to complement the great communications, the FAQs, the web messaging, the emails, is to make personal outreach calls to those employers. So our team of 18 counselors across the state, they manage those relationships. So we have reached out to all 75 employers just to make sure they have what they need, to see what questions they have, to let them know, probably the most important thing, that we're here to help them. So they're not on an island. We're here to help them, to answer their questions. There's still a lot of work to do, but that's something we continue to do on our end to help get the message out. We've reached almost all those employers. We have about 15 that we haven't been able to contact, but we've left voicemails, emails, and we're doing second rounds and third round calls. To answer the question about feedback, we have not heard anything negative. What I would expect for some of the larger impact of the top 5, a couple have commented this is going to create some work for them, but nothing overwhelmingly negative, no pushback. There's still some work to do, but we're keeping a finger on the pulse, and we'll share those as the months continue here. As far as outreach, we've made those calls. We are also doing webinars. So we did our first of 2 webinars this week, Tuesday. We had our first employer webinar session. We had 36 employer attendees at that session. That was from 27 employers. So we had about a third of the impacted employer population participate. Really good session. Not a lot of questions, so we're going to maybe change some things up for the next one. The next session is Tuesday of next week, and we have a similar level of registrations from the employers out there. So making calls, continuing to make outreach, offering webinars. We may do another series of those if the need presents itself. And then, of course, reaching out to participants as well.
Question on that. That's the Zoom.
WebEx.
Can you let me know what those are?
Yeah, absolutely.
And secondly, you're keeping, I need to be able to say publicly that we have touched every single participant, employer. So are you keeping a list and deduping it, make sure you're not counting somebody twice? I just need to be able to say that we've spoken to every employer.
Absolutely.
Well, we can say we've attempted to speak to every employer, but I just need to know like a attendance sheet or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a list of each of those employers,
Okay.
dates we've made calls, if we haven't contacted emails.
All right. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, thank you for that. And webinar is next Tuesday. We can get the registration out. Anyone that wants to attend.
And since you were here last, there was a major article in either P&I or the Wall Street Journal about the pressure, the challenges that we face. I think we said that on board, didn't we?
We did. We also shared that with Prudential.
All right.
Thank you. So still a lot of work to do. We'll keep you updated on progress. We'll get the registration links out to the group. We'll give you details on the contacts. Unless there are other questions on 403B.
One question, are you getting any indication at all about participants moving to the 401k or 457 plans?
It's still a little early. We're just starting to do more with at the participant level. We've gone through a lot of the employer outreach. What I'd say is those that are terminated who aren't employed, their opportunities are probably a little bigger than those that are employed and with an employer that offers multiple 403Bs. So it's too early to see trends on that, but I would think we'll be able to give you that definitely by the next morning, maybe even the next month.
Thank you.
To follow up on that, I just want to, is there going to be 1 or 2 or 4 people in your shop that is helping, that we're holding accountable? Or is it?
I have one person on my team in particular that's a running point on doing the outreach, the coordination. Yeah.
One person can't talk to 1,400 people, obviously. There's 1,400 participants, right?
Yes.
But I'm really concerned about taxes and things being checked properly in the box so that people don't get taxable distributions. I'm really concerned about putting people in an IRS vortex that we help them get out of. So I just don't want to be responsible for that if we can implement it. So, yeah.
But we definitely have one person kind of running point on a lot of the employer coordination, but the outreach will happen across all 18 meetings.
Is this happening in your other clients?
Terminating the plan. No, this is very unique for government.
All right, continue.
Good questions. Anything else on 403B that we can answer? Okay. I'm going to jump over to page 57 on the materials.
Just thank Zora and Chrissy and all the work they're doing on this. I just want to thank you all.
Great partnership. Communications have been amazing. Page 57 on the materials, we see a breakdown of our education activity for 2021. Big year. Look at the bottom right of that page, the number 58,440. Those are the number of total attendees we had throughout the year in either our group education events or our participant one-on-ones and employee one-on-ones. So really strong year for engagement. When you look at group meetings in particular, 1,725 for the year. That is 18% higher than the year prior. We had 23,677 one-on-ones. That's 16% higher than the previous year. In December when we met, we were coming off of National Save Month, which was October. You can see those numbers again at the top of the page there. That was a very strong month for the whole year. But when you look at the entire year, we saw steady increases in our engagement throughout the year in group meetings and one-on-ones, and it led to a very strong end in December. When you look at the second half of 2021, we averaged over 2,000 one-on-ones per month. So we're seeing employers continuing to get comfortable with the model to engage us, and I couldn't be more pleased with where we ended. And we even see that momentum carrying over into this year in January and February. So it's exciting to see. The other thing that's not on the page, but if you break down the group meetings and you go a little deeper, we've shared a lot in our last couple of meetings, our statewide engagement strategy. So when the pandemic first popped up, we created new forums, what we call statewide. So to complement what our counselors do with their employers regionally and at a territory level,
we're doing education events that are open to the whole state at one time. Those numbers that I shared with you, we did 25 statewide events last year, 25 live webinars. Those events in total had 7,178 attendees. It's about 10 to 15% of those 60,000 engagements last year came from those statewide events. We get a lot of positive feedback. We see it helps people connect to the resources we make available, including the counselors. So that's something we're continuing to build on even this year. And I'll share some more here in a couple minutes. And Treasurer Follow, to your point, special thanks to Christy and Zora for their partnership, because their communication support and getting information out there has been very, very helpful in helping ultimately those participants. Moving over to page 58. The education and engagement is important, but we hope it drives people to take action, and we hope that action then improves retirement readiness. What you see on slide 58 are enrollments for the year broken down by quarter. When you add up each of those quarters from last year, we had a total of 23,201 enrollments. That was a record level. We haven't had a level of enrollments that year, or that much in a year, for 6 years. So a very strong year for folks taking action. Not on the page, but I'll share contribution increases, folks increasing their deferrals, record levels, 36,923 increases last year. That's the highest level ever. So very, very strong actions we see being taken by employees to improve retirement readiness. We also engage employers. So in addition to providing education at an employee level, we're playing a relationship management role for those 1,000 sub-employers out there. We had 3,000 employer meetings last year. It's a great opportunity for us to not just talk about a 403B change, but to talk to them about the importance of education, to drive advocacy, to drive communications, and to help support them as we engage their employee populations. We also talk to those employers about adoptions, actions they can take. We had 37 new plans added last year. You'll see that broken out on pages 59 through 64. We had 38 employers either add or enhance an employer contribution program. So really, really strong levels of actions being taken, not just by employees, but also employers as well. And then you can see the breakdown of each of those employers and the various actions they took in 2021. Lastly, I wanted to share a couple updates on special initiatives. We covered 403B earlier, still a lot of work to do there. Sticking with the employers, last year we started a new series called the Employer Corner. This is a quarterly webinar we offer to all employers to get into topics, things of interest to them about the program. The topics change every quarter, so we did 4 of those last year. We had 900 attendees over those 4 sessions last year. The cool thing is we see a lot of the same employers coming back, which tells us we're hitting a need. We see them show up and register for event 2 and 3. We're on to something. So that's something we've continued this year. As we saw the success of that building last year, we had talked to Jeff and Tom and team, what else can we do? We decided to continue that series, but also offer monthly sessions. These monthly employer webinar sessions are geared towards new contacts, folks that are new to that employer, new in their role, and have some form of administrative responsibility. So the things we go into are the website, how to log in, how to use the processes that we make available, the resources that are available to them, as well as the reports that are available. We really want to make sure they start from day one, understanding this program and their roles and responsibilities. We've done 2 of those this year. We just started them. We've had 150 folks register for those sessions. So I think through that, through the quarterlies, we see we're hitting a need, and that's something we want to keep building on this year. Statewide sessions, as I mentioned, have been very popular. Our most popular statewide education session is called the Roadmap to Retirement. This is a session devoted to those that are about 3 to 5 years out from retirement or at retirement. January, we maxed out our registration. We had 1,200 people register for that event. And we saw equally similar levels in February. There's a lot of interest in there in these sessions, so we're continuing to build these out. Today, in fact, we have a regional retirement planning conference in an area where we have 10 counties. The employers in those 10 counties we've invited. This is our team providing education on supplemental plans in partnership with Vicki Roberts' team, who does the DB education. So we're bringing kind of a comprehensive education view on retirement. We had 650 people register for these events.
Is it Vicki Roberts?
Yes.
Do we have our Vicki Roberts?
Mm-hmm.
On the DB?
Yeah, the DB. She covers the DB side and we do the DC, but we
I'm sorry.
one section. Yeah. very popular sessions. We get a lot of interest in these. We've been doing these regionals for a while. This one in particular, we haven't seen this level of registration. So Vicky, along with Tanya, a lot of times work with Doug, Mayor, will do the DB side. We see a lot of interest in these joint sessions. So that's something we're continuing to do. And we think we'll do these regionally, probably every month, which is really cool because it allows us to engage virtually and find different ways to provide people with the information they need in a more comprehensive way. Finally, from a statewide perspective, the K through 12 space, a lot of opportunity there. What we find with educators is because of the nature of the role, it's hard to engage them during regular business hours. So we actually created a new series on Saturdays, once a month, Saturday learning sessions for teachers. We did our first one in January. We had 400 people register. So that was a pilot. And we said, you know what, 400 people on a Saturday that show up, there must be a need there. So we did another one in February. We had 166 people register. So many thanks to Christy and Zora for their help communicating that. I know there were some things that happened on social media to promote that event. We saw some big spikes when that information got dropped on social. So that's something we're going to continue each month. So a lot of different ways we're trying to engage, not just at a counselor level, but also at a statewide level. And the response has been very, very strong and positive. Last update I wanted to share is with the retirees. So folks that are entering retirement, we know that's a critical phase for them. There's a lot of decisions they're faced with. We want to make sure we support them. So we continue to make our courtesy calls to those folks each month when they're retiring. Last year, we made 3,150 calls to retirees. Inception to date, since we started this in 2020, we've made over 5,000 calls to retirees. And the response has been overwhelming, very positive, very appreciative of the calls. A lot of folks don't know that they can stay in the program. We want to make sure they know that we're here to help them with the questions they have. And I think this is best articulated the need in a recent call that we had in January. We reached out to an individual, one of the many retirees, just to check in, see how they were doing. As we talked to this individual, this participant had saved over $1 million in the supplemental plan. So this person entering retirement, $1 million account, and they were currently in the process of working with an advisor to potentially roll out. But they didn't know they were mainly vested. So through the course of that discussion, the outreach, the education we provided, they realized the opportunity that they had staying in the value with their Bailey vested status of being in the supplemental plans. So ultimately stopped that rollover, decided to stay in the program. I could tell you stories like that all day long. Folks that were calling that need that help. And so we're sending emails, we're doing a lot to communicate that personal outreach call, just to let them know that we're a help for them, we're a resource for them.
So if you roll out, it taints your Bailey?
If you leave, if you roll out of the 401k to an individual product.
I'm stunned that I didn't know that. I'm not Bailey, so maybe that's why I don't know it, but wow. Yeah. That's a big deal.
Huge deal. Yeah. I mean, the population gets smaller and smaller every year, but there's still a lot of folks out there. So that's something we continue to reinforce.
All right.
So a lot going on, a lot of things.
We need to focus on that next time. Communications.
Something you want us to cover next time?
No, we need to focus on that in our outgoing. It needs to be the front and center of our next publications because does anybody have an estimate how many Baileys there are?
We looked at that a few years ago. I can't remember the exact total, and it
Can I
dropped.
see a show of hands of the people in the room who are Bailey? Look back. All right, what'd you say?
We looked at that a few years ago and did a big, research on that group of folks.
It's less than 100,000.
Oh yeah, it's. I don't want to guess, but maybe 5,000 people.
Right. That sounds about.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like to Matt's point, it drops a little bit every year, but yeah, like we'll run into dozens of stories every year where someone literally was in the process of working with an advisor. The advisor wasn't aware that they were Bailey vested or that they would lose this benefit if they rolled over to their firm as well.
So you would have to have been invested by 84.
I think it's 89.
August.
Oh, started working 84.
Well, that's for the DB plan, but for the 401k, as long as you were in
open the account by August of '89.
Okay. Is there any other little Bailey things out there, little triggers I don't know about that we could use to help us on retention?
Not to the hammer. That's the big hammer right there.
It's a big loss.
Now, those participants have aged out or are getting very close to it.
So they'd be paying state income tax on that if they do this.
Correct. They
5%.
Would they lose that? Yeah, completely lose that tax savings.
In addition to the loss of the other benefits we talk about all the time.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm just,
No, it's a great question.
well, I'm just a little humiliated. I didn't know that. So it's a big thing. It's a bowling pin.
So a lot going on. I think a very strong year. Thank you to the board for your partnership and to staff. A lot of great work happening, but still a lot of work to do. So looking forward to the next meeting. We'll give you more updates on the 403B. I've got some actions here that I will get information on the webinar as well as Treasurer Falwell, the folks that we've contacted as well. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. So just a couple of updates from my end today. First and foremost, in terms of the transaction with Empower, everything continues to make great progress there, and that's expected to close in early second quarter, subject to regulatory approvals. So I fully expect that when we're back down here at the May meeting, that transaction will have successfully completed by then. In addition to that, we continue to do webinars with all of our plan sponsors with Empower to continue to provide information as that's getting closer to being here. The next webinar is scheduled for February 28th, actually, the next scheduled Empower webinar. And then in addition to that, we're going to also start that participant awareness. So about 10 to 15 days prior to close, we're going to have a pre-close participant communication that'll go out to just let participants know that this is coming. And I know I've mentioned this in prior meetings, but on that close date, the participant experience is really going to be the same. The same counselor, they'll work with the same counselor, the same phone number, the same phone number, the same website, the same website. The only thing that they'll really experience on that first day of change is that they'll notice the Prudential logo changing and the Empower logo replacing it, along with some of the other like footnote disclosures on the website. But that'll be the real only change that they'll experience from the day of the sale until the eventual transition to Empower's record keeping platform, which we'll know more of the cadence on that at future meetings that I'll be able to share. In terms of the two quick hit things that I want to talk about, Patty, if you don't mind going to slide 7. For our goal summary page, just now that we've completed yet another year, I just wanted to really hone in on just a couple of statistics on slide 7. You know, we have contractual performance guarantees around average monthly contribution rate, active participation rate, and then goal maker utilization. So I went back since our new contract started and just, you know, compared as we sit on 12/31 of 2021, the average monthly contribution rate is at $235. That's up 31% since our new contract started. 1/1 of 16, the average monthly contribution rate was $180. Active participation rate, similar story there, up 22% since 2016. It was 28.99 in first quarter of 16. And then goal maker utilization among all members, that's also up approximately 22% as well. We're at, among new members, just under 70% of all new members are going into goal maker. That was 57% in 2016. So continued nice momentum there as well. And then in the interest of time, the last thing that I wanted to focus on today, Patty, if you could please go to slide 50. I wanted to take a moment, Treasurer Falwell, this is the new view that you asked us to build out to focus on percentage of assets saved. So actually slide 51, Patty. Perfect, right there. So going back to what we did is we went back in time from 2015 through now we have all of the year 2021. And we look at, in terms of all of the plan assets, how many of those are in the status of retired or separated from service, or folks that have stopped their contributions. And that's kind of like that pool of assets that we deem as at risk for either a distribution or a rollover out. And then about a year ago at this time, the ask of Treasurer Falwell was, what's the total percentage of assets that we're saving? And then on the far right-hand side is kind of the answer to that question, where you can see what the trend line has been since 2015. And last year, the trend line was its highest total ever of 83.20% in terms of the percentage of assets saved. So up from 80.56 the previous year. But that only tells part of the story. So I wanted to make sure that I also drilled in on, Treasurer, the question that you asked at the December meeting, because you rightly pointed out that, you know, in terms of the percentage of asset saving, we have more and more folks retiring every year. The market is also growing. So that pool of assets at risk is also growing. So your ask of me was, in terms of the rollover outs, we see that higher dollar amounts are going out, but is it because participants' balances are bigger, or are more participants also rolling out? So we went back and pulled that data through the end of the year. And while we did see a higher rollover out trend in 2021 with about $150 million more rolling out, the trend also was just over 1,040 more folks also rolled out in 2021 versus 2020. But 2020, I think, was a unique year because of the pandemic, where there's not as much activity in that space. So I think a better comparison is going back to like 2018 and 2019. So last year in 2021, there was about 5,864 participants rolled out. In 2019, that was 5,263, and in 2018, that was 5,198. So a little bit higher than that 2018 and 2019, but not significantly higher. Like last 2020 was 4,824. But you also have to remember that as your plan grows and you're getting more into that baby boomer population, those participants that are in that phase is also growing too. So you should expect that, like, naturally you're going to have more participants roll out and more assets probably roll out for the foreseeable future. But I just wanted to make sure that we answered that question from the last board meeting.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions. If not, we can turn the time back over to you.
All right, any questions on the phone? Any questions from staff? Thank you.
Just leave it there.
Leave it there?
The next presentation. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Now we're to folks from BNYM. Talk about 401 and 457 custodial update.
Good morning.
Yes.
My name is Declan Dennehan, and I lead the segment for Bank of New York Mellon. I'm joined by my colleagues Phaedra Garibaldi, who's the relationship manager, and Brian Shea, who's the service director, and are all part of the overall North Carolina relationship. We value the placeness. We consider it a privilege to work with North Carolina, and we very much appreciate the opportunity to provide this update to the retirement plans this morning. I'd like to start with some general comments about our business, where we're focused, investments we're making, innovations we're bringing to market, and then as it's really important to many of our clients to know they're dealing with a strong financial partner, I'd like to share a few key facts and figures on the strength of our business. Then, along with Phaedra, provide an overview of some of the specific services we provide in the supplemental retirement plan, along with some shared accomplishments in 2020. Last year was in many regards a remarkable year for BNY Mellon, and there are three broad themes I would like to emphasize. The first is strong performance and improved organic growth for our business. Second is the number of new and innovative solutions we're working on and we've already brought to the market to assist our clients. And the third is our continued focus on harnessing our One BNY Mellon culture and capabilities and using this to deliver more comprehensive capabilities to help our clients. To expand a little bit on these points, 2021 saw a meaningful increase in our organic growth. In fact, it was the highest in a number of years, and our business, asset servicing, wins were up almost 50% compared to 2020, and we continue to have a meaningful pipeline of new business coming in. This is important to support our business. The average deal size we won was up, and that represents larger, more complex business. Also important, our retention rates were also up. I believe this is a testament to the service quality and reflection of our broader capability, as well as the open architecture that we're bringing to clients. Our ETF business delivered substantial growth. In that business, our assets under custody and administration grew by approximately 30%, which outpaced the broader market. And that doesn't include some of our recent wins, including $350 billion from BlackRock's iShares. In the public funds segment, momentum continues to seem to be in our favor, and wins there included the Arizona State Retirement System, the Maine FAIN Plan, the Oregon 529 Plan, Maryland Secure Choice, and additional business from Connecticut and Oregon. Across the rest of our franchise, in our clearance and collateral management business, we're currently running at over $5 trillion in balances, and we continue to benefit there from our role as the primary clearer of U.S. government securities. Our markets business is very strong and is strengthening with across FX and securities lending areas in particular. Our clearing business in Pershing gathered over $60 billion in new assets, which was a record for us last year. And our treasury services business continued to move strongly as payment volumes recovered to pre-COVID levels. Finally, our management business saw strong inflows driven by our liability-driven investment and fixed income strategies, our responsible investment funds, and our index ETF. So overall, our business remains very, very strong. It's important to make sure that we're a strong counterparty to our clients. Second theme I mentioned was innovation, and I'd just like to call out a few. The first area is digital assets, and while it's still early days, recognizing the regulatory landscape of this space is evolving, our investments are beginning to pay off there. We've launched a digital assets unit last year, and since then we've announced a partnership with Grayscale Investments, and over the summer contracted with almost half of the pending crypto funds in the US, as well as virtually all in Canada. It's still early, but we're very excited about the disruptive potential of tokenization and smart contracts, and we see a lot of opportunities there to help our clients both on the efficiency side as well as on the revenue side. In our core securities and asset servicing business, for a number of years now, we've embraced an open architecture strategy we call Omni, which is a client and data-centric platform that enables us to work together with other fintechs to provide the best optionality to clients. We've partnered with a number of leading firms and big tech companies, including Bloomberg, Aladdin, SimCorp, InnoCap, and others. Why we're doing this is that despite our substantial investment in technology, we find that by working with best-in-class providers, we're able to bring bespoke capabilities to our clients and tie them together in a way that benefits our clients. So we're able to provide specific services to different areas of our clients. So for example, dealing with our investment committees, providing governance and oversight functions like dashboards and benchmarks, on the front office, providing data and analytics capabilities, OMS integration, risk management, markets, functions, etc. In the middle office, compliance and risk management capabilities, recon support, margin management, and in the back office, which is the core of our business, continuing to strengthen custody and administration. We're continuing to make investments in the business. We are not focused on sort of big bang acquisitions, which are very, very disruptive to our business and a very high return target. But we continue to build on our portfolio of strategic investment. And our particular emphasis recently has been in ETFs, alternatives, especially private markets, and overall data and analytics strategy. So we've made investments in entities like Milestone, Vestwell, Fireblocks, and more. We're also continuing to emphasize our investments in real-time payments. We embraced this early on with one of the leaders, and we were actually the first to do a real-time payment on the Clearinghouse network a number of years ago. Last year, we also were the first to launch a real-time bill pay solution for clients. And beyond real-time payments, we've also been able to leverage the cloud for wire payments, and we were the first to complete a trade finance deal using the new SOFR reference. As the world's largest global collateral management, we're continuing to drive towards global collateral mobility and optimization and expanding the scope of eligible collateral. And for example, last year, we introduced Chinese bonds as eligible collateral on global tri-party platform, and we were the first bank to add agency mortgage-backed securities as collateral on overnight repos. So the investment innovation, something that we started doing a number of years ago, continues to pay, continues to gain momentum for it. The third thing that I wanted to mention was what we call One BNY Mellon. BNY Mellon, like many of the other custodian banks, has got a much broader range of businesses that differentiate us from some of the competitors. And one of the things that we've been trying to do there is emphasize the interconnectivity and operational synergies between these businesses, so we can do a better job for clients like North Carolina of delivering all of our capabilities in an integrated fashion. Last year, we conducted a review of how we're working across the businesses, and we've set up a new infrastructure internally to make sure that we're bringing the capabilities across our treasury business, our markets business, our clearing business, our custody business, our investment management business, and so on together in a cohesive, comprehensive fashion. I would like to share a couple of key facts and figures with us because it's very important that clients know about our strength. The two main metrics that we focus on at the bank are our assets under custody and administration and our assets under management. For our assets under administration, just under $47 trillion now, which is up almost 14% year over year. And approximately 60% of that growth was driven by organic new business and about 40% higher market value. Under management have increased to $2.4 trillion, up 10%, driven by higher market values as well as some net inflows. Our revenue $15.9 billion, and our earnings for the year were up 8% year over year with a pre-tax margin of 29%. Our capital and liquidity remains strong. Our Tier 1 leverage ratio is 5.5%, which is well capitalized. And the bank carries the AA rating from S&P, which is one of the strongest bank ratings in the US. This financial strength enables us to continue to invest heavily in technology. We spend over $3 billion a year in technology, and we're emphasizing resiliency, artificial intelligence, cyber and security, and business intelligence. These are all areas of investment that are critical to our clients and critical to what we do. One example that I would like to invite any of the board members when in New York to visit and see directly is our Global Command Center. Is basically like a NASA control center where we visualize trillions of dollars daily, and the data accompanying those flows that are going through our ecosystem and piping system. It's a very unique perspective. It also highlights some of our cyber resiliency capabilities, and it's something that we're actually very proud of. Specific to North Carolina Supplemental, there are a number of services that we provide, core ones being our custody, the comprehensive range of services, our accounting and administration. So there we're providing fund accounting, NAV calculations, unitization, portfolio accounting, and GASB reporting, our data and analytics capabilities, and our liquidity management support services, which include things like liquidity and foreign exchange. Trying to be respectful of time, that's a very quick overview of where we're focused and the strength of the business. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Phaedra to share more about how we support the supplementary retirement plan, some of the specific capabilities providing, and also to share some of our shared accomplishments and priorities for 2022.
Great. Thank you, Declan. Good morning, Treasurer Falwell, members of the board, Jeff, and the entire team, the Supplemental Retirement. So, Patty, at this point, we are probably on slide 9, just for context. And as Declan mentioned, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you all today. Hopefully, at our next meeting, we can be there in person. We are looking to go back to our offices sometime next month, which will be fantastic since we haven't been there in 2 years. So we are greatly looking forward to that. As Declan just spoke a little bit about the role of a custodian and the Bank of New York more broadly, what I wanted to do, as you can see on this slide, is bring that forward and give you some real life examples of how we as your custodian are partnering with you as well as interacting with your other trusted business partners. For example, as you just heard from Prudential, as well as the team from Galliard, who I believe is going to be speaking in the near future. And just really want to thank them as well, because we do all work together very well to provide services to your retirees, and hopefully that continues in the future. And we just wanted to say thank you to them as well. So on slide 9, you can see some of the initiatives that we completed in 2021, as well as what we are working on together now through 2022. In the beginning of 2021, we started working with Galliard, as well as finalizing and implementing a new fee schedule, which seems to be tracking to the expected new run rate, which is great. We were able to recognize some significant savings for the supplemental plan. We also worked, as I mentioned before, with Galliard and Wells Fargo in converting over the underlying of the stable value fund from Wells to Bank of New York Mellon, and then we completed that in April. That went very well. And we, again, would like to thank you for that additional mandate and your support of our expanding that relationship. And thank you also to Paul and his team. There was a lot of planning went into that, a lot of work leading up to that, and very well. During the fall, we implemented the International Small Cap Equity Fund changes that had been discussed at previous board meetings. That was around September, a little bit into October. And as you can see, ongoing, we look to work with the plan in opening new accounts as needed, closing as needed, and monitoring those stats. Looking across the page to 2022 priorities, we understand from just having listened to Prudential as well as discussions with Jeff that obviously the discontinuation of the 403B program is going to be very busy for the teams and winding that down through summer. So we recognize that, and we look to support you where needed on that. Alongside that, though, however, Jeff did ask that we do continue to look for ways that we can together to help him and his team recognize some process efficiency. And this could mean anything from building reports, help the team. It could be instructor capture that we're working on implementing, another way of getting us directives a little bit easier than the good old fax and WebST methods. So we're looking at that. And another item that's been front and center priority for both organizations, I'm skipping down a little bit, is placing a dedicated service director on this relationship. And for that, I introduce Brian Shea, also on the line, to you. Brian's on his second tour here with Bank of New York Mellon, and he brings with him a wealth of knowledge, both how internal plumbing works at the bank as well as the custody and the technology. And he really does have a passion for excellence around client service. So we're hoping to see great by having him as an addition. And as Jeff and I were speaking about this week, looking to coordinate with you as well on getting Brian down to everyone and spend some time. So that was one of the things that we had discussed with North Carolina, is this person spend some time.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to getting more engaged in the relationship. Sorry, Pedro, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you, Brian. Okay. So currently, Brian is up in our Everett office training alongside Greg Wilcox, who is also the service director on the state of North Carolina. And as Brian said, he will be down there shortly. I think Declan touched on our market innovation and thought leadership and one BNY Mellon, so I'm not going to spend time there. But before I open it up for any questions, again, just would like to say thank you to Jeff, Reed, Chris, all the team members on SRP that we work with, as well as the treasurer and the board for your continued trust and support that you place in us. We don't take it lightly. We very seriously. We have parents that take from the state and federal government, so this is very personal to us. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions anybody may have.
Any questions from the phone?
I have a question. This is Melinda. In view of what's happening today with the Ukrainian invasion and the orders that are coming out of the White House and so forth, especially regarding our international finance systems, do you have any indication at all as BNY Mellon whether or not there will be a sanction coming down to all of us in the United States who manage money and are fiduciaries, relative to the effect that will we be asked to be partners in the sanctions against Russia? Is because I'm assuming in our international portfolios, we probably have a lot of Russia that has our money. Do you have any indication at all?
So this is Declan. I'll attempt to take this. So the government is rolling out a range of sanctions. We do not have any pre-knowledge of them, but as they are rolled out, there is a formalized process that will be implemented, and we are required as a highly regulated entity to enforce any sanctions as directed by the government. Through the look-through tools and transparency tools in the portfolio, there are, we've obviously got real-time ways to look through and see what the portfolio at any time and what your exposures are. But, we do not have any forewarning of the specific types of sanctions that the government will or may enact related to the Russia-Ukraine issue.
How quickly do you expect to get a memorandum out to all of your client base in general and North Carolina in particular, relative to how soon we might be advised of what we're supposed to do?
We provide communications to our clients. There's a very sort of regimented, rigorous process around this. As we are notified by the authorities, and whatever the timeline or the authorities provide with certification, then notify our clients through a combination of what we call NetX infos, which are alerts through our online systems to our clients, as well as through outreach when relevant to our clients. And that's where the relationship management team comes into place. We can touch base with every single one of our clients globally very, very quickly when required to. So if we were instructed to do something today, we would do it today. And we would notify. Okay.
Any other questions? No. Yep. I've got just a general question, and it leads over into our defined benefit plan. We're getting a lot of outside interest in our proxy voting. I don't need War and Peace on this, but maybe Reed can update us later. But the proxy voting for the DC plan, same pattern as the DB plan.
Yes, we glass Lewis for both.
Okay. And BNY Mellon is involved in that. Does anybody, this is the treasurer, does anybody at BNY Mellon have any thoughts about what's being said these days about proxy voting and that kind of thing, as far as any thoughts on that?
This is Melinda. I have read one article where the two major proxy advisory firms seem to be on two sides of issues. One is saying yes to some companies and the other one is saying no. When I start reading articles like that, I have a tendency to land on the side of the proxy firm that's saying no, because I think if they have a problem with management, it's probably it's a good advice to the stockholders. The last one I read about was $100 million bonus through stock options and so forth to the CEO of a major, Microsoft, yeah,
Apple?
not Microsoft. Yeah,
Apple.
a major.
It was
Yeah,
Tim Cook
major,
from Apple.
Yeah.
Jeff Hancock at the Supplemental Retirement
To attempt to respond from a proxy voting perspective, I was sort of biting into two areas. There are the acts that we administer on behalf of our client, and generally speaking, there we are taking direction from the client based on either their proxy voting policies, or if they are using an outside advisor like ISS or Glass Lewis or anybody else, we are simply taking direction related to any proxy issues. Then for assets that are directly managed by the bank in our investment management boutiques, each of our investment management boutiques have their own investment policies and proxy voting policies, which are established and published. The proxy voting just follows that. In many cases, our investment funds will also use the service of third parties like the proxy advisory firms, just to help evaluate the wide range of votable issues that come up each year. But then it will be up to proxy vote each of the funds to make the final judgment on sort of more items that don't fall clearly within the boundaries of whatever policies are, or there'd be another layer of judgment on it. So, but for most of our clients, we are simply acting agency capacity in terms of taking instructions from them.
Okay, thank you.
Can I clarify one thing just to make sure that this is Chris Morris, I'm the co-CIO in the investments division. Just with regards to proxy voting and proxy policies, we do use Glass Lewis, as you all know, both on the DC plan as well as the DB plan. We set our own proxy policy, and we're not required to use Glass Lewis's policy. We generally start with their recommended policy, and then if we feel we need to make changes based off of that, we can do that. We can set our own policy, and then they'll vote on our behalf based on our policy and how we instruct them to vote. So that's the general process, and we review it at least annually internally for both, like I said, both the DC and the DB plan. So, we're not required to follow their policy. We can set our own policy, or we can follow their policy if we want to, but we have the flexibility to do what we feel is needed and set our own policy essentially, and they'll be voting on our behalf based on how we instruct them to vote.
All right. Thank you very much, BNY Mellon. So,
Okay, thank you very much.
we're now down to investment update. Galliard, Paul, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me, Mr. Treasurer?
We can.
Okay, great. Great. Well, good morning, board members, Mr. Treasurer, staff, and guests. Again, thank you for allowing me to present today. Also want to thank BNY Mellon for the cooperation, again, for the successful custody conversion of the underlying stable value assets from Wells Fargo to BNY Mellon. So we could start on page 1 under section 1. Just kind of give you highlight the progress made in the sale of Wells Fargo Asset Management, which again, Galliard is a wholly owned subsidiary of, and a new chapter begins. So as mentioned at our last meeting on November 1st, 2021, the sale of WFAM, which is Wells Fargo Asset Management, from Wells Fargo the bank to a consortium of 2 private equity firms, and those were GTCR out of Chicago, Wedge Capital out of New York, was completed. Wells Fargo, the bank, again, will have a 9.9% non-voting passive stake, primarily made, again, because of Wells Fargo's distribution channels. Also announced was a retention program for select senior personnel, mainly the investment teams and traders, where they were given an opportunity to purchase equity up to about 20% of the firm, alongside the private equity investors, to further align key personnel with the buyers, more or less skin in the game. Joe Sullivan, as announced previously, has begun as the new executive chairman of the board of directors and the new CEO of Allspring. The Wells Fargo Collective Investment Trust, or CIT, trustee business conversion, again, was separate from the sale of WFAM. And as of January 25th, 22, the trustee of the Wells Fargo CITs will now be SCI, and is planned for April 1st, 22. North Carolina has mostly separate accounts and was only affected by the liquidity buffers trustee. And that fund that is used as the liquidity buffer is known as the Wells Fargo BlackRock Stiff Fund Share Class S. We are working on a new name for this liquidity buffer, as it will no longer obviously contain the words Wells Fargo in the title. For Galliard's Stable Value Collective Trust, currently known as the Wells Fargo Stable Return Fund and the Galliard Managed Income Fund, they will have a new trustee change as well. The Wells Fargo title, as I mentioned, for the other collective liquidity buffer, the Wells Fargo title and the Stable Return Fund will also change to Galliard, again, around that April 1st, 22 date. How does this news affect Galliard? Well, no change. Same brand, same investment team, same investment philosophy, process, and executive management, and most importantly, a consistent client and end participant experience. We will be transitioning away from our old phone numbers, as anyone who's gotten an email from me sees, but our emails will remain. We also look to return to the office at the end of the first quarter. Does this board or staff have any questions regarding these sale updates? Okay, if not, if we move to the next page, basically who we are, we see in the left-hand column as of the end of the year, 12/31/21, our assets under management were roughly 92.1 billion. This was down from 93.3 billion last quarter. Since the start of the year, we've been seeing participants reallocate away from stable value as our assets under management, just as a reference, as of 12/31/2020 was 95.4 billion. And we had our all-time high AUM at the end of October of 2020 at 97.4. However, with the events unfolding today in the recent days, I would suspect that participants may be reallocating into the principal preservation option again. If we look at what makes up that 92.1 billion, 74.4 billion stable value assets, which represents roughly 81% of our total, with the remaining 19% or 17.7 billion representing our standalone high quality fixed income mandates, mainly in the short to intermediate duration ranges. 80 plus stable value separate account clients, which North Carolina is a part of. And we have about 102 employees on staff, which has remained roughly at around the 100 employee level over the past few years. But as mentioned previously, Galliard is growing and expanding. In 2021, we did have a handful of folks leave, but we have since found replacements. We have, a handful of new openings, and we're working to fill those as we're able to get through the candidates. So again, positive news. We are growing, and looking at the events today, stable value definitely has a place in participants' retirement plans. The middle column, 205 institutional clients. We have about 88% of them have been with us for at least 5 years, and that includes the state of North Carolina. And 53 of them have worked with Galliard for over 15 years. State of North Carolina has been with Galliard since December 1st, 2010. That's roughly about 11 years. And again, I'd like to thank you for your continued faith in Galliard. Right column, we continue to be one of the largest managers of stable value assets. And as mentioned previously, in July of 2020, we did celebrate our 25th anniversary. Our senior personnel tenure with Galliard is over 20 years among stable value and fixed income. Any questions on this page? Okay, if we move ahead to the next page, page 3. Again, this page shows the metrics of the state of North Carolina Stable Value Fund as of December 31st, 2021, and the portfolio has continued to provide consistent expected statistics. On the left-hand column, we see the assets as of 12/31 were roughly 2.38 billion. And that decreased a little bit, about 18.2 million since last quarter. If we look at what made up that 18.2 million decrease, we saw 28.4 million come from net outflows, which was roughly 1.1%. But this was offset by the income from interest earnings of about 10.2 million. So nothing really out of the realm there. Looking at the portfolio characteristics as of September 30th and December 31st, 2021, we can see that the average book value wrap financial strength ratings have not changed over the quarter, remain strong at A+. Same can be said of the underlying quality of bonds that make up the state of North Carolina Stable Value Fund, where they stayed at AA over the past quarter. Number of contract issuers did not change and remained at 5. The net blended yield or crediting rate remained flat over the past quarter at 1.65%. The underlying yields, however, did increase over the quarter from 1.01 to 1.35%. And again, while that 1.35% is growing, and it's still on the low end, we look at comparable alternatives, say the 91-day T-bill or 3-year constant maturity treasury, and that 1.35% provides a higher yield than the 6 basis points you get in a money market fund in a 91-day T-bill, or the 97 basis points, 0.97% in the 3-year CMT as of December 31st. Duration has remained pretty consistent since last quarter. When we look at the market to book ratio, while market yields have risen recently, the effect on the underlying bond portfolios has been negative. As interest rates rise, bond prices fall. Thankfully, the Stable Value Fund's market to book ratio will help mitigate the impact of a rising interest rate environment, as that 1.88% gain will be amortized into the blended yield over the duration of the fund, roughly to a tune of about 0.59% per year, all else being equal. With the higher yields, the net blended yield should in time follow the direction of interest rates and increase. But again, it does it on a lag. The column on the right shows that the assets have been pretty consistently growing over the past few years. And again, as the portfolio distribution below shows, the portfolio remains consistent in the underlying allocations with a small liquidity buffer that handles daily participant transactions, and further demonstrates that the portfolio remains consistently fully invested in the fixed income market. Any questions on this page? Okay, if we turn to the next page, page 4, these are the book value returns or the actual participant results. And again, the strong metrics provided from the previous page, we see strong, steady, and consistent long-term relative outperformance that we've been able to provide the state of North Carolina's participants. This page shows what the participant experience was as of December 31st, 2021. And over the fourth quarter and over the last year, performance has outperformed the 3-year constant maturity treasury benchmark by 22 and more impressively 130 basis points respectively. And even over longer timeframes, 5 and 10 years, have provided net of fee outperformance of 79 and 106 basis points. Inception returns, which I mentioned were about 11 years, shares the same story at 121 basis points of outperformance. Again, very strong relative outperformance provided by the underlying investments, and to a greater extent, that market to book premium that's remaining a significant driver of current performance. Again, one thing to keep in mind in the future quarters is that the stable value fund may lag its benchmark, the 3-year CMT, if there's a material rise in interest rates, but not immediately, again, to that book value smoothing of returns in the stable value fund. Any questions on this page? Okay, if we turn to the next page, page 5. This represents the historical cash flows, over the fourth quarter and of 2021. And while I mentioned before, outflows are the most significant in the fourth quarter, with a negative cash flow of negative 1.2% or roughly 28.4 million. The net cash flow for the year was negative 20.3 million. But again, that was more than offset by the 42.2 million in investment earnings. Message here is that the figures on this page do not appear much different from our other stable value separate account mandates. As participants in general move their assets out of stable value and into other plan options with a little bit more risk. I assume, like I mentioned, that we will see positive net cash flow in the first quarter, as markets have been pretty rocky with macroeconomic topics such as today is Ukraine, the consistent supply chain shortages, we have inflation, percolating in the minds of investors. So that's just my gut instinct on that, but we will see at our next meeting. But I assume that inflows will be positive next quarter. If we turn to page 6, we see the historical portfolio characteristics. And again, over the roughly 9 quarters of data shown, we see that the ongoing amortization of the underlying gains show a pretty stable historical net blended yield in the upper left-hand corner. And as mentioned, we would expect this number to more or less drift lower, flatten, and then start to rise, as it follows the movement of interest rates. Again, albeit with a lag due to the smoothing of the underlying market value bond portfolio performance. I would say we are near that flattening stage, as we saw the historical net blended yield remain at 1.65% over the third and fourth quarters of 2021. The 101.88% market to book will again help mitigate the decline of the underlying performance, because again, as interest rates go up, bond prices go down. The historical duration, as as you see in the lower left-hand corner, has remained pretty consistent between 3 and 3.25 years. The upper right hand of the page, the market to book has recently decreased, again, as the underlying yields, which is the lower right-hand corner, has generally increased over the past few quarters. Any questions on this page? Okay, turn to page 7. This page details the book value wrapper allocations, and again, they've remained consistent over the last quarter. As mentioned earlier, they all remain investment grade and maintain the same financial strength ratings from a year ago, and all are 2 notches above our lowest minimum allowable grade of A-. During the fourth quarter, more precisely the first day of the fourth quarter, on October 1st, we did have a RAP reduction, for Prudential, going from 16 to 15 basis points. And again, over 2021, we saw in the first quarter, we saw fee reductions from AGL, MetLife, and Nationwide. There were no changes in the second or third quarter, and we saw one, as mentioned, from Prudential in the fourth quarter. While we have seen fees coming down, I would guess that 15 basis points would be the floor, and none of our 10 approved wrap providers has gone lower than 15 basis points. But if they do, we will be first to share the great news with the board and the treasurer if we are able to get further fee reductions. And really, just to highlight again that one MetLife contract, this is a separate account GIC rather than a synthetic GIC. So the insurance separate account fees also include trustee custody fees, which, if compared to the other synthetic GICs wrappers that you have, if we included those, they would be on par with the others. So that 17 basis points isn't an outlier. But again, we are consistently having conversations with MetLife to see if there's any fee reductions in the future. Any questions on this page?
Hey, this is the treasurer. It should be no secret that with a portfolio this size, that I get lots of calls and from folks who, given the transition that you've recently gone through to do a stable value product a lot cheaper. I'm not asking you to negotiate in a public meeting like this, but I think, and I always appreciate getting the amendments that Reed and Jeff hand me to, lower the fees 2 basis points here and 2 basis points there. But I really think you need to really sharpen your pencil and look at what the competition is offering.
All right. Yeah. Well, I do have some good news on that front as we move through the report. Duly noted, treasurer. If we turn to page 11, we'll just get right to it here. So flipping to page 11, this is a fee page. And again, this is as of December 31st, 2021. And again, highlighting the fees charged on the stable value fund. And really, between the third and fourth quarters, there really basically was no change. Stayed at 29.3 basis points over the third and fourth quarters. But again, if we look at from a year ago at this point, they dropped over roughly a tune of 2.2% or 0.6 of a basis point. If we just look at the investment management fees. However, this on this page it's not shown, but I'm excited to announce as of January 1st, 2022, and as a most favored nation client or an MFN client, we have lowered our Galliard investment management fees roughly about 8% using the 12/31/21 assets. The new fee schedule, which will be shown in the first quarter report since it happened on January 1st, will save participants roughly about $112,500 annually through the Galliard investment management fee savings. We did create a third amendment to the IMA that reflects the lower investment management fee, and that was signed and returned to us on January 7th. So again, it's good news that we are lowering fees, and we should see that reflected in the report next quarter. So hopefully that is good news to everyone participating on this call today.
So what fee should I have planted in my mind as I discuss this?
It's going to be, well, you see the investment management fees paid to Galliard, it's 0.59%. It's probably going to be, a little bit lower than that, 0.58, 0.53. I did calculate it out to see what the effect was on the dollar value, and I got it down to roughly about 112.5 per year, just savings on this fee reduction alone.
Okay. So my follow-up question is, when our members get their statements in the mail like I do, on that table, I thought it showed stable value of having expense ratio of 30.3. Is that inaccurate?
Well, that also includes the 2.5 basis point overlay, I believe. Oh wait, no, that's included here. No, so I mean, what we show on this page is the fees that we are charging. The 30.3 might have been earlier in the year. I do remember that number, but I know over the past couple quarters it's been 29.3, and that is inclusive of the North Carolina administrative fee.
It just seemed to jump off the page as being higher than even things that have more volatility and more activity and more churn, that are less stable. Mm-hmm. So you think things that were less stable would have a higher fee than things that are called stable. So that's why anyway, I'm doing all this from memory, so we'll just move on. And thank you for sharpening your pencil about this.
Absolutely, and we're happy to do it. Okay, if there are no other questions on fees, and the good news there, if we turn to the next page, page 12. Again, these are the underlying fixed income managers within the North Carolina Stable Value Fund. Galliard manages roughly about 48.1% of investments internally, and that would be broken out 33% in the short portfolio, 15% in the intermediate portfolio, with roughly 50% managed externally. Again, split roughly among the 5 external managers. If we flip ahead to page 13, we see that these are the rolled up total portfolio statistics, and the manager allocation column, as I mentioned, it's not materially changed over the quarter. External manager allocation has remained near that 50% level consistently. The high level message here is that the fund is positioned a little bit more conservatively than we were earlier in 2021, as treasuries have inched up in allocation, but we are still actively looking for relative value in spread sectors. As they have been pretty tight in 2021. We do maintain a small liquidity buffer, so that really shows that we remain fully invested in the market, albeit a little bit more conservative. If we flip to the next page.
Mr. Treasurer?
Yes.
I have a question.
Got a question.
Sure.
What is agency MBS or AGY? I'm sorry, I'm not, these codes are.
Mortgage-backed securities.
Yeah, those are government-sponsored mortgage-backed securities. So like Fannie and Freddie, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, things like that.
And the second acronym that Nels asked about?
ABS or MBS. So MBS is mortgage-backed securities. CMBS is commercial mortgage-backed securities. ABS is asset-backed securities, structured securities.
Very good, thank you.
No problem.
And when you own those products, when interest rates are plummeting, you have refi risk. And when interest rates are stable or going up, you are able to hold on to those high interest rates for longer because people can't refi.
You got it.
Thanks.
Okay, if we turn to the next page, page 14, general theme of performance here. This is the underlying market value performance of the bonds that make up the state of North Carolina's Stable Value Fund. We see the relative performance in the fourth quarter was mixed, with some managers slightly outperforming their benchmark and some slightly underperforming. But again, this is all within a handful of basis points. That being said, all the underlying strategies have outperformed their benchmarks over longer time periods, specifically the 3, 5, and inception columns. Over the quarter, Galliard managed underlying portfolios slightly underperformed their benchmarks, but again, it was a handful of basis points. And among Galliard and other external managers, what really helped over the quarter was an overweight to spread sectors, was slightly helpful. And so in addition to allocations to asset-backed securities and tax bill municipal securities. Allocations to agency and MBS or mortgage-backed securities were generally beneficial. As the treasurer noted, interest rates went up, so the ability to refi or the willingness to refi was not there. And being shorter in duration than the benchmark also helped. Whereas general security selection and the overweighting in commercial mortgage-backed securities was, a relative detractor to performance. As mentioned, again, pretty flat quarter. No manager significantly out or underperformed for the quarter. And again, we don't have any issues with any of the fixed income investments for the quarter. Again, the theme of the managers in general was a movement to a little bit more conservative stance as inflation expectations rose. We continue to be defensively positioned with our underlying fixed income portfolios. And again, we think we are well positioned given the current market environment. Again, the pandemic will continue to add uncertainty to the outlook, as evidenced by the recent emergence of Omicron, elevated inflation, and the resulting central bank response, and perhaps more pertinent for the markets. Again, sustained inflationary pressure has resulted in a compressed timeline for monetary policy action. We have seen an increased hawkish Fed and elevated geopolitical risks, as we see today, have triggered volatility in risk assets. As such, portfolios are currently positioned with a slightly higher liquidity protect against downside risk. And again, this also provides us dry powder for opportunistic purchases as we see markets react like they are today. There's just a couple highlights for the external managers in terms of organizational changes. For Jennison, Tom Wolf, who is the head of fixed income, has announced his retirement at the end of 2022. At that time, Jake Gall and Itai Laurie, who are both co-CIOs, will assume the co-head of fixed income roles, and we are okay with that change. And as mentioned previously for TCW, Tad Rebell, who is the CIO and one of the 4 generalist portfolio managers, he retired at the end of 2021. Lard Landman, Steve Kane, and Brian Whalen continue as generalist portfolio managers, with Steve Kane and Brian Whalen named co-CIOs as of September 30th last year. TCW confirmed to Galliard that David Lippman, CEO, is expected to depart from TCW when his contract expires at the end of 2022. TCW has hired a national search firm to assist in the CEO hiring process. So while we recognize that these are both meaningful departures, as such, Galliard will be closely monitoring the CIO transition and the search for a new CEO, along with personal developments that may arise. So, we're monitoring right now. We don't have any issues with these high-level changes, but we will be keeping a look on that. Those are all the comments I had. Are there any questions from anyone on the call today?
Questions from board members?
Yes, I've got a question. This is Steve Beam. Paul, given that the projections over the next 12 to 18 months are for the Fed to raise probably between 4 to 8 times the Fed funds rate, do you see any other short-term impacts of this potential change? And you've mentioned you're a shorter duration because of that, but anything else that could be an unintended consequence of that type of a move?
It's a great question. And again, yeah, the thought is there might be anywhere from 4 to 7 rate hikes, but and I think it can depend on, what is happening in the markets too. I've heard, the March meeting, there might be a 50 basis point rate hike rather than, and now maybe today it's down to 25 basis points given what's happening in the markets. So really in terms of short-term dislocations or whatnot, we've seen this telegraph from the Fed, which has been, appreciated as investors, what they're planning on doing in the next year. So we are prepared for, the increase, in rise in the interest rates, as pronounced by the Fed, either way, whether it's 25, 50, whatnot. And again, we're taking a little bit more conservative stance. We're a little bit higher quality in our bond portfolios and really trying to have a little bit more dry powder for buying, those opportunities that present themselves on a value basis. So, we're expecting, whether the Fed raises 25, 50 basis points in March, we are well positioned for it.
Other questions? Just part of this stable value product is the ability to wrap it with insurance companies, right?
Exactly.
Okay. I understand there might have been a ruling in France over the last couple of days regarding how life insurance companies are looking at the deaths associated with COVID. So nothing to discuss, just to be aware that, the perpetuality of a life insurance company is based on the ability to hold on to the assets longer, not die earlier. So I think you should sort of put that in the back of your mind somewhere and monitor what's happening over in Europe regarding how these cases are being looked at as far as death benefits, how that might translate over to the United States and how it might impact some of the insurance companies that wrap the stable value fund.
Absolutely. Will do, Treasurer.
All right. I mean, we're seeing in this building. Try to find a different word for it, but we do have a death team here at the Treasurer's office to just deal with participants who pass away, either killed in the line of duty or natural causes. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Now we're back to Callan.
Thank you. It's good to see you all. For those that are on the phone, this is Elizabeth Hood speaking from Callan. I'm joined by my colleague Weston Loomis. So we'll start today. I'll give a high-level overview of the capital market environment, really to frame the performance discussion. So to give everybody a sense of what was driving performance, we'll look at the high-level participant level options, and then Weston will help us walk through what really drove the performance, looking at the underlying managers within each of those options. So starting with the capital market environment, we've been talking for the last several quarters about the expectation that we'll see more volatility. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, obviously, with the pandemic. Last year, we saw 2 new variants coming into play. We're expecting interest rates to rise. We're not sure exactly when or how much. We're seeing inflation. So lots of uncertainty, global turmoil, obviously a big factor this year. So we've been expecting volatility to come back in the markets, and we've really seen that. So last year and really continuing into this year in 2022 as well. So we provide a monthly update. We won't go through this in detail. It's really a short period of time for reference, but I do want to mention 2 highlights from the January performance. Again, the volatility is coming back. We saw strong returns ending in the fourth quarter, a great 2021. But in January, every major asset class generated a negative return. So very, very different environment. The silver lining for participants is within that 2 highlights. One, the passive strategies all tracked their indices. So even with the volatility, they continue to provide low tracking error and giving participants broad exposure for a low fee. For those that choose active management, 4 of the 5 options outperformed. So as we got those negative returns, participant balances fell less than the market, so protecting capital. But we saw some reversals with that volatility. So some of the managers we've talked about not keeping pace with these sharply rising markets did really well. So names like Wedge, Mondrian, Loomis, who participated but didn't outperform in up markets, are now protecting capital in down markets, which is exactly what we'd like to see. So again, as fiduciaries, we want to think long term, but also take a look at the short term. So participants, again, are getting that diversification to help smooth out the performance over time. So taking a quick look, if we could turn to the quarterly performance report, starting on the second page, and we'll just go quickly through again, just setting the stage for the fourth quarter of 2021 results. Very strong performance, perfect. Very strong performance from the U.S. equity markets, double-digit returns for the year. But it's interesting, we had a good fourth quarter, good year, but there's a lot underlying those numbers. So if you look at the 2021 return, or the broad market, the Russell 3000 was up 25.7%. What we don't see is that almost 10% of the names within that index fell by 35% or more. So even though we saw those really strong returns, there's a lot going on more broadly within the market that isn't reflected there. You can also see that in the S&P 500, that concentration, so that very narrow leadership within that the 28.7% return of the S&P 500, the 10 largest stocks drove 60% of that return, or I think 65% of that return. So of that 29, roughly 20% came from 10 names. So when we looked at the active management space, we're going to see whether managers have an equal weight or over or underweight really had a big impact on their relative performance there. So pretty narrow leadership. But again, broadly speaking, those that had broad exposure, very strong returns to end in the fourth quarter and for the year overall. On the next page, we have international market performance. The key takeaway here is good returns for the year, but still trailing the U.S. markets. So we'll see here, developed markets outperformed emerging markets, and small cap outperformed large cap here. Within the fixed income markets on the next page, we've talked a good bit about rates. You'll see most participants have exposure. More broadly, we look at the Barclays aggregate. So the bond market was flat in the fourth quarter and negative for the year, so down 1.5% for the year. In terms of leadership within fixed income, the higher risk assets did better. So high yield, long duration outperformed shorter duration and higher quality names for the quarter and for the year. So that kind of sets the stage. And if we can skip 2 pages to page 5, take a look at participant balances. So that market environment generated very strong investment gains, and this will pull up in a minute. So we saw investment gains of over $643 million. So very good performance benefiting participants in the environment, which far more than offset the outflows of about $23.7 billion. So the plan ended up with participant balances at the end of the year, a little over $16.3 billion. So good growth, again, participants benefiting from that strong market environment. And then on page 6, page 6, we'll start here. I'll wrap up with the participant level options. So as a reminder, with the multi-manager options, participants see the top line. We look at the underlying, but we'll start with what the participants see. So on the top half of the page, we show the passive performance. Again, the indices or the passive managers very closely tracking the indices after fees. So giving participants good broad exposure with low fee. For the active menu on the bottom of the page, we saw 3 of the 5 active options outperforming their respective indices for the quarter and for the year. And longer term, very good performance, again, across the board, broadly speaking, for all of the investment options. Fixed income in particular, navigating this volatility quite well. Large cap, we're going to talk a little bit about the concentration effect in some of the individual manager performance, along with international, and then nice to see the small mid-cap option outperforming. So again, we've seen some changes in leadership. Some of the options that had been doing really well trailed for the quarter, but overall a very positive report card for that's benefiting our participants. Any questions high level before Weston gets into the attribution? Yes.
Back to your opening comment, do you anywhere present the upside downside capture ratio of the managers or funds?
We don't in this report, but we do in the bigger staff report that we provide. Okay. We can add that. I mean, if that is an important metric. We'll have to see that.
So I was just trying to kind of, tie back to your opening statement about you're lagging on the
Yes.
increase, but
And we can certainly share that at the next meeting again. So for reference, the board sees a summary report, and for staff, we provide a much deeper dive into each manager. So it's provided, and we can summarize it next quarter for the board as well.
thank you.
All right, well, on page 7, I'll talk about the individual managers and what really goes into those top line results that Elizabeth mentioned. But in the interest of time, maybe I always hate to skip over the good news. There is a lot of good news on this page, but just we may focus a little bit more on some of the ones where you would look and you'd say, oh, wow, what's going on? So on this page, we'll talk about Macquarie, Sands, and Loomis Sales. First with Macquarie, I'll just say that both the short-term and long-term results are in line with expectations. They are lagging their benchmark, but just in terms of historical cycles that we've seen from Macquarie, this is certainly in line with what they have done. Maybe from our standpoint, the bigger concern is not so much their performance, but it is that continuing transition from what was a long-time portfolio manager, Ty Nutt. This retirement occurred way back in 2019. But the continuing just monitoring those new people. Nick Mulvaney is the new portfolio manager, or not new anymore, but he was the replacement portfolio manager. He seems to be doing a reasonable job, but this is just something that we've been monitoring for a long time, making sure that he is truly going to manage the portfolio, as it has historically been managed.
Did you say Nick Mulvaney?
Nick Mulvaney.
Oh,
yeah.
Sounds close.
Yes, that's right. So, that's just one that we'll flag, and as we talk about it on, what's on Callan's watch list, this is one that would be on our Callan watch list more for the people component than anything else. But I'll address that in a minute. Just sticking on this page, we'll talk about Sands Capital a little bit. Looking at the quarter and the 1 year, this is one that stands out as very challenged performance. It wasn't that Sands overnight just went out and bought a bunch of different stocks that underperformed. This is I call it a chain of momentum that occurred in the marketplace in that fourth quarter. So while things looked a lot the same, growth outperforming value, there were a lot of changes of direction and the types of stocks that took off. One of the things to note about Sands is one of the most high tracking error, high conviction, concentrated growth portfolios that you can buy in the marketplace. When markets go up, we would expect Sands to go up more. So this is, while you do have some more defensive components that really are the core of this large cap strategy, this is one where they have a much better upmarket capture, but in down market, they typically will catch more of the down market. That was not true in Q1 of 2020 for very odd reasons, but they actually captured less of the downturn, which was maybe an anomaly in their history. But this is one where short-term performance looks very challenged. I don't want to gloss over that long-term performance, though. As you look at the 3 and 5 year time frames, still top decile relative to their peers and still outperforming their index. What is an outlier here on this page is if you go down the last 3 year column and you look at that Russell 1000 Growth Index. The index itself ranks in the 9th percentile of active managers. Now, said differently, the index is outperforming 91% of active managers. As we think of efficient markets and managers can't outperform because of efficiency, you would probably never see this, but you think of kind of the index coming in around the 50th, maybe the 40th percentile after fees are taken into account. this 9th percentile is pretty rare. And what is driving that is something that Elizabeth mentioned earlier, that concentration of the index, the top names in the index really driving the results. And so in the growth segment of the market, this has been, a much bigger theme. You have Microsoft, you have Apple. These are all making up well over 5% of that Russell 1000 index. And when those do well, that dominates performance. So getting back to Sands, what is Sands doing that's different? Sands is buying some of the more mid-cap names, some of the, they do have exposure to Netflix and Amazon and Facebook, or now Meta, but they do not have any Apple exposure. They don't have any Microsoft exposure currently. When the markets changed direction, the Microsofts held their value, whereas some of these more mid-cap names that Sands buys did not. So that, it's not something that is anomalous as you look at the last 1 year performance behind their index by 22.5%. I'll just mention that if you were to rewind to calendar year 2020, they were ahead of their index by 33%. So this is something that they have done from time to time. They take wilder swings. So in terms of, while we don't like to see it on this side of the index, the difference from the index is something that is within our expectations. And then Loomis, this is your more higher quality growth strategy. So as Elizabeth mentioned, when markets go down, when markets get choppy, the expectation is that this manager is going to hold up better than the index. And so far, if you were to look at January performance, that has been the case. They have held up better. They still have some digging to do to get out of kind of that performance hole, if you will, relative performance hole. But just in terms of expecting them to capture, all of the upside in a market where it is going up 34% over the last 3 years, their performance is in line with our expectations. And a lot of the challenges in their performance over the last year were both errors of commission, things that they held in the portfolio, namely Alibaba. Disney was a name, Autodesk was a name that got hurt. But also the errors of omission. So not holding Tesla, that has become a very large name in that Russell 1000 growth index. That was a name, just by not holding that name, that was a detractor from relative performance. So, certainly understand that rationale. And then over, the longer term history, the decision to not hold Apple has been either a home run for active managers or has been, a strikeout. Here more recently, Apple doing well and such a large name in the index, it has challenged performance. So, over time, we would expect for Loomis's performance to improve, but certainly I think a positive sign to see in the very short term, which was the month of January, where you did see that volatility. Loomis is holding up better relative to the index. So in this next page, we'll talk about, on page 8, we'll talk about Bailey Gifford and Wedge Capital. So Bailey Gifford, a very similar story to Sands, in that this is a growth manager. They are not going to be as concentrated as Sands and probably not as high growth as Sands. But in terms of the types of names that they're buying, they're looking for those transformative, those resilient growth companies that are going to grow for a long time and grow pretty fast. And, so as you did have interest rates moving up and a lot of those higher valuation, higher price names, those took a hit more, less so here in the fourth quarter, but throughout the year that was a theme as interest rates came up on the market. You see that also continuing to occur in January as we've seen interest rates start to move up. Some of these higher price names have taken a little bit more of a hit. Nothing that we think is worthy of putting Bailey on any sort of watch list, or are we concerned with performance? In our mind, it makes sense, and similar to Sands, as you look out beyond that 1 year time frame, the results look very good, well outperforming the broad index, 19.04% relative to the ACWI ex-US index of 13.2. We We also include this ACWI ex-US growth as just a secondary comparison to say, well, Bailey is a growth manager. How do they look versus a growth benchmark? And they are also outperforming that growth benchmark over the 3 and 5 year time. And then maybe to wrap up the manager performance with some better news here. Wedge Capital, as you look at these time frames, still behind their indices, but this is one where what a difference a month makes. As you roll off January of 2021, where last year around this time we were talking about the meme stocks, we were talking about these very low quality, the GameStops, the AMC theaters, the names where there's a challenge business model where these companies, you start to say, all right, what is the path to profitability? And you say, well, there isn't one. And so, but the names were rising in the index more due to short squeeze and some, trading driven by more social media influences. So that hurt managers in the small cap value space more than most. So as you see that January of 2021 roll off, Wedge is now outperforming their index over the last year by 3%, which is, much improvement from what we've seen over years past. So Wedge is trending in the right direction. We think that they still have a ways to go before we tell you, hey, from a performance standpoint, it's time to take them off the watch list. We've had numerous meetings with Wedge. We're still comfortable with the process that they have with what they do in this multi-manager portfolio. We think their style still fits, but I think that is a positive sign to point out is while we look at them over this time frame, as we start to see what has happened over the last 11 months plus January, that the performance is improved. On page 9, I'll just hit this really fast, but this is how Callan views the watch list. And as we go around and talk to a lot of clients, a lot of times the watch list is very performance focused. We do think performance is very important, but ultimately it's that people, process, philosophy that drives the performance. So in our watch list, we try to be more holistic in our view of, all right, if people, process, philosophy is indicative of the performance, what managers can generate, that is one of the things that we want to point out is if we're cautionary or we're worried about something, we want to point that out to you all. And these few pages are a good way to take a quick look as to what is going on. We have a short-term performance component as well as a long-term performance component. I don't think we've ever defined these for you all. So let me do that here. Short-term performance is anything between 1 and 3 years. So that's what we're thinking about as we say, all right, does it make sense? Is it outside of expectations, in line with expectations? Anything 5 years and beyond is what we would call long-term performance. So one of the things that we talked about with staff going into this meeting was, all right, well, Sands, gosh, they were 22% behind their index. Shouldn't they have gotten a cautionary in performance? And we never thought cautionary was something that was worthwhile to put here, but we did think about putting it in blue, which is notable. But we did put it, we went back and forth and, should we put it in blue? But it just probably what we should have done is post 2020, when it was up more than the index by 33%. That's where we should have flagged it as notable. Logic would tell us that if a manager is taking enough risk to outperform by 33%, they're also taking enough risk to underperform by 30%. So, just given this swing that we just lived through, it is notable like it was last year. But that's something that we certainly debated and putting this through. I think also too to end on a good note, we'll go to page 11. And this is, if you have noticed the change here over time, this is a subtle change and just wanted to point it out. But Galliard stable value, we have had this overall light, if you want to call it, in red over the past number of quarters. And we have moved it from under review, which is, hey, we have concerns about the organization, the changes, to cautionary. So our view is improving on Galyard, just given the stability, given a lot of what they do from their process side remains the same. Their portfolios are performing well, but one of the things that we have pointed out to you all, the organizational changes going from Wells Fargo, Allspring, and now Allspring being bought by the two private equity firms. So that's just something that we are getting more comfortable with in time, and we'll just continue to monitor it and watch it closely. But our view is improving there. Any questions on the managers or performance of them?
Questions from the phone?
I have one quick question. This is Steve Beam again. Wes, I heard what you said, and I read the comment about Wedge small cap. When I look at their 3 to 5 year numbers, they're in the bottom of their performance against the index or the composites. And I understand the short versus long-term duration. If you look at page 8, I think. Do we have a 7 year number for Wedge to get a better feel for their longer term 5 to 7? And at what point do you suggest you make a change between 3, 5, 7 year if the performance continues to lag that far behind?
Yeah, so I will provide the 7 year number, and then I'll touch on the more difficult question of at what point. But as you look at the 7 years, and this is ended as of January of 2022, their net of fee results have come in at 7.97. The index is at 9.15. So expectation is for them to be beating that benchmark. So for the 7 years, they have not done that. Now, the harder question to address is when you make a change. And I hate this answer, but I'm going to provide it. It does depend on the manager. If it is a manager that takes wild swings and they are going to be more different from the index, we think that time frame, that horizon for how much patience you need to have with your manager is extended. Also, it depends on the category that you're managing in. Large cap U.S. equity is historically harder to outperform. Your time horizon has to be longer in order to meet expectations there. So, just getting to Wedge and their performance here, they are on a very tight rope. They have known this for some time. A lot of their performance challenges over the 7 year time frame hasn't come from 7 straight years of underperformance. It came from a very challenged 2020. It came from the January of 2020 in particular, January of 2021 in particular, and then some mistakes that they made with a name PG&E. They held it as too high a weight in the portfolio, but the decision at the time, and we think it is still the prudent decision, is to give them time to work out of that challenged performance that was generated more in 2020 and 2021. That's where we currently stand on it. I do need to get around to actually answering the question of when is enough for Wedge. I always am cautious about putting a time frame on, because things can happen in the marketplace. But for Wedge, it is almost quarter by quarter, to where if we don't start to see improvement here soon, we need to ultimately show our constituents that we're finding managers that can add value here. So just from a higher level standpoint, 6-9 months from now, if we're still talking about poor short-term and long-term performance for Wedge, I don't think we have a choice but to make a change. But from where we sit right now in this meeting, we think it would be premature to go and, start a replacement search for Wedge or do something different. I would say, go back to what Elizabeth mentioned earlier, that higher level performance for small cap. This is, I think, a number that is important as we've talked about challenges with this small cap option as a whole. It's underperformed the index. Now for 3 years, it has now moved ahead of the index. So in terms of the role that Wedge is playing, yes, they are under their benchmark, but as part of that role, they have not been such a drag on performance that it's dragged the overall option performance down.
To build on Steve's question as treasurer, when you look at this, do you look at their AUM and whether other people are heading for the exits? And will we be the last person standing? Does that go into your analysis?
It does. When we see massive outflows, we certainly don't want our clients, particularly our defined contribution clients, to be the last one holding the bag, if you will. That has not been the case with Wedge, to my knowledge. We haven't seen massive outflows. Sure, they have lost some clients, but I don't even know if net flows may be actually positive for the strategy. So, in terms of our view, we have them as satisfactory on our overall watch list, and that is from understanding what drove the underperformance, getting comfortable with that, and ultimately recognizing that we think the strategy is right for our performance on a go-forward basis.
How long have they been on our watch list?
Long time, yeah.
Since I've been here.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least the last 8 quarters.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, y'all work with a lot of managers, okay? And we've been very patient because it's been a difficult investment environment. But my question is, in your list of similar managers in this particular area, how many of them on your approved list have done better than Wedge over the last 7 quarters? Do you have somebody better that you have more confidence in?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the peer ranking for the index,
Jeff, sorry.
over the last 3 years is actually, the index itself is in the 77th percentile. So it has been an easier space for active managers to outperform. Now, the one that's tricky is do we have managers that we like better? That is a tough question to answer. Because it really depends on, right, what is the fit? What is the role that Wedge is meant to play as part of the broader overall option?
We don't ask for much. All we ask is to try to hit the index,
right.
okay? I'm not looking for a spaceship. I'm looking for somebody who'll get us there.
Yes. Yeah, and we agree with you. This is small cap. The expectation is for more consistent outperformance. And, we do think that has to show improvement in order to continue to manage for you all. And they have to do so, as I mentioned, in a very that condensed time frame, because patience that has worn thin, and you all have been patient with them. And what we're saying is just to continue to urge, continue to have patience. We do think it will turn around such that it will show outperformance over the short and long term.
We want to be cautious too, not to, there are, in any asset class at any time, there will be some manager who's done better. We want to be sensitive not to go chase the performance of someone whose style has been more in favor during a specific period and maybe buy in at the wrong time. So here, we've been waiting for an environment where Wedge perform more in line with expectations, which we're starting to see over the last 2.5, 3 months. That's not enough time to say great, we're done. But we want to see if that trend continues. So with the increased volatility, we would expect them to do better. So far, they have. So through January, their 1 year is ahead of the benchmark. What we're watching for is to see if that continues. And if at any time it doesn't, and they're not performing in line with expectations, that's when we would at that point recommend a search.
Okay, my next question is, if I were you sitting in your seat, probably the first thing I would do would be to look at the entire list of everything they own. And then as of today, because the world is changing and the chessboard has been cleared, and I think playing defense going forward is probably going to be the wisest thing to do. And what's going forward is what's going to happen to every single one of those companies that is in that portfolio. How are those companies going to defend themselves? It doesn't make any difference what the manager is saying. It's the quality of the portfolio itself. And I would ask y'all to take a look at that and evaluate it.
Sure, and I can't speak to the underlying individual names, but just from a sector perspective, Wedge is overweight to financials, and just given, I know that hey, but interest rates, a steeper yield curve is actually really good for financials, and just given what we've seen in January on a go-forward basis, that where are they underweight? They're underweight to the expensive technology names. Those have been the ones that have sold off the most maybe not the most, but they've sold the more expensive technology has sold off, quite a bit as interest rates have gone up, and discounted cash flows are more important in near term than they are at terminal value. So, as we think about it from more of a sector stance, from a sector level, and it's hard to say, macro concerns drive a lot of noise, but it's ultimately Wedge's ability to find those names that are going to operationally perform well over a longer term time frame. So while Ukraine may come in and, hey, it drives down financials short term, or interest rates do this or do that, and it drives a lot of noise, ultimately what we think is why you have bought Wedge as an active manager is their ability to understand that company and whether or not that company is going to operationally improve over time. That is,
Okay, but from my perspective as a 74-year-old, nearly 74-year-old female who's seen a lot, who's been investing for more years than I care to imagine, I've seen things come and go. And what I have learned is if you don't pay attention to where you're heading, it doesn't make any difference to where you are or where you've been. And, Wall Street Journal, you walked in with this Wall Street Journal today, and I absolutely agree. Front page, this crisis sets a new struggle for global supremacy. I mean, last time this happened was when Hitler decided to go pussyfooting over the German borders. Same thing. We're not dealing with a bunch of banana republics, where little tin pot dictators are coming and going. This is serious. And as a fiduciary, I'm worried. We got people to take care of here. And I want to make sure that our managers are paying attention to where the puck is going, not where it's been.
Hey, Mr. Treasurer, this is Steve. One more time, can I ask Callan to look at something a little further between now and the next meeting?
Absolutely.
I just pulled up a fact sheet, assuming this is correct, on Wedge small to mid cap, and it appears that the total assets they manage, and I'm not sure that I would assume we are included in that, as of the year, we're a little over 1.2 billion. So if we have 357 million, we're about 25% of their assets in that strategy. So it looks like they have been going up the last 5 years. So they have not had liquidations, but do a little deeper dive into that and give us some better comfort level that we're not the elephant too big in the room to get out easily as well.
Certainly. We'll come back and report on flows, and we'll provide that to staff in the interim.
To build on Steve's question, do we have a statutory or internal policy regarding us being a certain percentage of AUM?
We don't have a hard policy regarding that, but we typically don't want to be
More than 10.
It's hard to say because it's really about strategy, especially public equity is a little different where, you know, it's much more liquid, right? And the illiquids on the DB side, we definitely have a more stringent cap, but on it really depends.
And small cap strategies tend to have lower AUM than large cap, so it varies a little bit by capitalization.
Thanks, Steve. We'll work on that. And I will just say that I know of the people at Wedge. I don't know the people at Wedge. I know of them. I don't know them. And I'm sure that being a North Carolina concern is part of the reason they've probably gotten the benefit of the doubt for a long period of time. And I don't say that in like we've done something good or something bad. It's just, I just think that's probably a blind glimpse of the obvious. So.
Thank you.
Anything else? Is that it? Sorry?
I just said we'll follow up with those with staff today. Actually, we have a meeting this afternoon and then circle back with you all formally next week.
Thank you. We'll go to our next agenda item. Chris is still filling in for Lauren DeMay. We posted that position, right?
Yes, we are hopefully towards the end of that process. So we definitely have a couple of finalists, and so hopefully we're getting close to filling that role in the near term. But yeah, we're still going through that.
Good. You have the floor.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. So the first agenda item I'll hit is the compliance report. I guess the good news here is there's really nothing material to report in terms of compliance, in terms of compliance exceptions. Sitting on the kind of the three items that we review, the divestment policies and prohibited holdings. We continue to monitor that based on our statutory requirements with regards to Iran and with regards to the companies that boycott Israel. We monitor that on a daily basis to ensure that none of our managers are holding any of the restricted companies. And for the quarter, none of our managers did hold those, and wouldn't expect them to, given that they have that list. But we continue to monitor that. The executive order with regards to Chinese military companies, again, that order initially went in place I guess toward the end of 2020, and then it was revised in the middle of last year. We continue to monitor that on a daily basis as well, and none of the managers currently hold any of those companies. And then last thing is investment guidelines. We staff reviews and monitors with the help of BNY Mellon, our custodian, the investment manager guidelines on a daily basis, and reports to us any exceptions, and any exceptions that we see, we kind of research further and coordinate with the investment manager if it's something that needs to be addressed. And there were no material issues for that during the quarter as well. So if there's no questions on the compliance, so pretty short report there. I'll move on to the 403B performance review. So the slide deck there, if you turn to slide 3, that shows the current asset allocation. So ending December 31st, the portfolio held approximately $32.8 million in it, up about $2.4 million from the previous quarter, mainly due to market movements and increasing equity markets for the quarter. 17.3 million of that was in passive funds, and the other 15.5 million was in active funds, as you can see on this slide. Moving to slide 4, we're not going to show up on the presentation due to licensing restrictions, but the board does have that slide in their materials if they want to take a look at it. It's essentially just the performance of each of the managers. As we just heard from Callan, they gave an update on kind of what happened in Q4. We saw kind of similar market sentiment in terms of inflation, supply chain disruptions, increased COVID cases, still COVID concerns led to increased volatility. But throughout the quarter, fundamentals remain positive. Global economy continued to expand, labor markets continued to recover, and we saw the major equity indices positive for the quarter with the U.S. Pretty significantly outperforming the non-U.S. markets, and fixed income markets were relatively flat for the quarter. So turning to the individual managers, the Metropolitan West Total Return Bond Fund, they slightly underperformed the benchmark for the quarter, just by about 10 or 11 basis points. The fund was down about 10 basis points, and the benchmark was relatively flat. That underperformance was driven primarily by issue selection among corporate credits, but like I said, pretty immaterial in terms of the underperformance, and the longer term relative performance remains very strong. Moving on to the Principal Diversified Real Asset Fund. This fund outperformed the benchmark for the quarter as well. Fund was up about 4.7% versus a benchmark return of 4%. Outperformance here was due to strong manager performance within both the natural resources as well as infrastructure segments. And longer term performance for this manager is extremely strong as well. Moving on to the Vanguard Windsor Fund. This fund, again, this one as well outperformed the benchmark fairly significantly, returning about 8.6% versus the benchmark of about 7.8%. Positive stock selection drove much of this outperformance for the quarter, specifically within the communication services, technology, as well as consumer discretionary. And then longer term performance remains very strong as well, as the strategy has significantly outperformed the benchmark for the 1, 3, and 5-year time period. On the flip side, we'll talk about the T. Rowe Price Blue Chip Growth Fund. This fund has struggled recently, specifically in this quarter. It returned 4.2%, while their benchmark, which is the Russell 1000 Growth, returned north of 11% at about 11.6%. Their stock selection was really the driver of this underperformance, while they've struggled within consumer discretionary, communications, and the technology sector. Their longer term performance has also struggled. They're now underperforming in pretty much every time frame we measure here, the 1, 3, and 5-year time period. Given the performance struggles, I think I mentioned a similar thing last quarter, as well as some organizational changes that they've had with the CEO retiring, the PMs retired as well at the end of the year, replaced by another PM, who'd been there a long time. But a lot of organizational changes, this one's certainly of concern. And, obviously, with all of these managers, we'll be kind of rolling off of all these anyways by the end of the year. So, we'll keep a close eye on it for the next, 6-9 months while it's the strategy. But this one, if not for the fact that we were, getting out of all these managers, this one may be up for being put on the watch list at the very least.
And do we have exposure with them in the 1 or 7?
No, we don't have them in either one. Yeah. Like I said, these are mutual funds that, we tried to mirror kind of the selections that we had in the 401k 457 the best we could. But with these are separate mutual funds. Some of them are closer than others, but yeah, we don't have exposure specifically to this mandate. Moving on to the DFA US Small Cap Fund. So this is Dimensional. This one is the only manager that we currently have on the watch list. And glad to say that looking at the performance here, they've significantly turned around the negative performance that they had. They had a really strong quarter as well as a phenomenal year, both on an absolute and a relative basis. For the quarter, they returned 7.4% versus their benchmark of about 2%. And for the year, they've more than doubled the benchmark. They had a return of over 30%, where the benchmark was at about 14.8%. So yeah, like I said, after a tough couple of years, the strategy bounced back significantly. And now we're starting to see the longer term performance exceed the benchmark as well. So with the strong 1 year, their 3-year return is now ahead of the benchmark by about 90 basis points. And then the 5 years still slightly lags, but significantly less than it had previously. So good to see on that strategy. The other good news on this strategy I'll pass along is they have decided to reduce the fee on this mandate from the straight management fee is from 30 basis points to 25 basis points. So a 5 basis point reduction in the management fee. And I think expense ratio we have is at about 33 basis points. So I would expect that to go down to about 28. So the good news there as well for the short time remaining that we were in this strategy. And the last manager on the list is Bailey Gifford. We're in a very, very similar strategy that's in the DC plan. It's the mutual fund, but it's very similar. And I know Weston covered that on the DC side. So same thing on this, where recent struggles certainly underperformed for the quarter, underperformed pretty significantly for the year, but the long-term performance remains extremely strong, where the 3 and the 5 years still significantly outperforms the benchmark. So that's my comments with regards to kind of the active mandates and my report on the 403B plan. So certainly happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Christopher, thank you for filling in. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Any questions? All right. Hearing none, we'll go to the exciting agenda item number 11, contract for foreign tax services.
Staff conducted procurement for foreign tax services, and I'll review the documents in your memo. It will briefly go into closed session so we can hear the confidential cost proposals, come back out, open session, consider the recommendation. I don't think that closed session will take more than 10 minutes. But as you're aware, the North Carolina International Fund has 4 separate accounts in it, 4 separately managed accounts. So for the securities in those accounts, we're responsible for tax compliance, for filing tax reclaims. And in general, that tax relief is pursuant to a treaty, a double taxation treaty, or local law. And we can seek relief in one or two ways, depending on the market. We can either file exemption documents up front before any taxes have been withheld, or we can file documents on the back end after we've already paid the withholding to get all or part of our money back. In addition, we have 2 markets, India and Taiwan, where we're required to appoint a local tax agent and file tax returns. We're opening up a 3rd market, Pakistan. So these services I lump under sort of the tax compliance versus the reclaim work. And since we unbundled at the beginning of 2016, Ernst & Young has provided the tax compliance work in India and Taiwan. And then BNY Mellon handles tax reclaims as part of its custodial fees. We started the procurement a few months ago, just as part of vendor due diligence, opportunity to explore other options. We received 3 responses: Ernst & Young, Globe Tax, and WTax. Globe Tax and Ernst & Young bid on both the reclaim services and the compliance services. WTax, they were limited. They bid just on the reclaim services. The members of the evaluation committee were Jeff and Alan, as well as Dina Moore-Solomon, who's a compliance analyst in investment management. And we're especially grateful to Dina for her work. She's worked in IND on foreign tax matters for several years. She's not part of the SRP staff, but she agreed to share her expertise and help us out. So the committee evaluated the technical cost proposals, considered our current provision of services versus any alternatives, looked for the best value for the plans, and based on that evaluation is 2 recommendations. The first is to retain Globe Tax to provide tax reclaim services to the extent that they're not already provided by BNY Mellon. The committee did look more broadly, but is making that recommendation. There's There are some claims and maybe some markets where Globe Tax could supplement BNY Mellon's services. And this is the same approach the department's taken for the pensions. IMD, Investment Management Division, retained Globe Tax about a year ago to do the same thing. Globe Tax has extensive experience in foreign tax reclaims and either ranked at the top or either tied or solely at the top in all 6 of the technical categories the committee looked at. The second recommendation is continue using Ernst & Young for the compliance services. As I mentioned before, they've done this since the beginning of 2016 with unbundling. They've provided good service during that time. And similar to Globe Tax, they do the same thing for the pensions, and they've done that since 2014. So with the board's approval, staff will try to negotiate contracts with both of those parties. And before we hear the cost proposals, are there any non-fee related, non-cost related questions?
Hearing none.
Okay, then we need a motion to enter closed session.
Let me hear about it, because I know these folks have been here 2 days, and let me just go through the agenda and we can release them and then we can come back. So does anybody sign up for meeting open to the public comments? All right. No one having signed up, we declare the public comment section open and now closed. And with that, we'll go into closed session to discuss this issue on the recommendation of the Assistant General Counsel. And when we come back in, we'll adjourn, and Linda adjourn us, given the heaviness of this day in our country and our world. So with that, I'll entertain the motion to go into closed session.
And if I could, it's specifically, we have to say it's
specific to General Statute 143-318.11A1.
Thank you.
I make a motion.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
Nels, did you sit there when you first came in?
I did, but the plates were moved to keep you straight, sir.
You changed it when I left the room from that? I'm a little more alert than you think I am. Motion is second being made. Any further discussion? You know, April Fool's is coming up, Tom. Payback is hell. So who moved it?
We fixed it.
I know who did.
It doesn't matter. Of course.
All right. Motion to go into closed session. It's second. No further discussion. Clerk call roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Shavella Thomas.
Aye.
James Lumsden.
Aye.
Michael Lewis. Steve Beam.
Aye.
Wyndon Hibbler.
Aye.
We're in closed session, and we want to thank our guests for appearing. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Great seeing you guys. See you in May. Well.
Need at least 5. Till May.
All right, Steve's back in. Okay, do one more.
What board members do we have back on the phone?
Steve Beam. Anybody else?
Just texted Lorraine.
Steve, can you hear us?
Lorraine says she can't get in.
Did you call your cell phone?
Hello.
Bella? Okay, good. All right. We have a motion on the table to adjourn.
Wait, did we get the?
We haven't got
approval
the alerts yet.
We have a motion on the table to approve the staff's recommendation. Okay, any further discussion? Okay,
We had Treasurer Falwell, we
aye.
had Shavella, Lorraine Johnson, James Lumsden, Steve Beam, Yep, thank you,
Thank you.
Wyndon Hibbler,
Okay, hereby approved. I'd like to hand the floor over to Melinda to offer some remarks in our adjourning resolution.
Thank you, Treasurer Falwell. As I said before, I have been on this earth nearly 74 years and seen a lot going on politically, economically, and so forth. And I have been sitting on this board since 2012 and am fully cognizant that this board and its individual members are responsible as fiduciaries to first manage this money in the same way that we would our own as prudent investors. And second, to do right at all times. Now, the problem is that we have to ask ourselves as board members, what are we going to do going forward if this Ukrainian-Russian war totally upends not only the work that we're doing for our participants and the management of the money that they have and the defense of the money so they'll all be able to retire. How do we connect what we do personally with what's going on in a worldwide arena that we are working in as financial people? This morning, as I was driving to this meeting and listening to NPR radio, I listened to our own Senator Tillis issuing a condemnation of this aggression against the Ukraine, its people, and he issued an immediate demand that we do everything we need to do as a nation to sanction and try to stop this without sending our own troops into that country. Well, right now, the Ukrainian people are dying, and Senator Tillis is asking the American public in general and us in particular to do the right thing as not only citizens, but as members of this board. The front page of the Wall Street Journal today says that this crisis has set a new struggle for global supremacy. This aggression is not just Russia against Ukraine, it's Russia against the world, because if he is successful, then basically what he is doing is knocking down all the pieces on the international chessboard, one by one by one. And we are the queen on that chessboard, and I think that Putin is aiming directly toward us through the Ukraine and through its new relationship and treaty with China. So I think it's incumbent upon us as a board to officially take a position that we support the White House and our elected representatives in doing everything they can to stop this and ultimately, protect the people that we are supposed to be serving and protecting. Offering them our thoughts and prayers is not enough. We need to stand together. And I would like to ask this board and in general, and Treasurer Falwell in particular as the chairman of this board, but also as one of the most respected, if not the most respected treasurer in the United States. And his compatriots, all the rest of the treasurers and the other in the 50 states, to offer their services and their support to the White House and to our elected leaders, and saying, what can we do and how quickly can we do it? And participate in the way we need to with the economic and political sanctions against Russia to stop this. And I would like to ask Treasurer Falwell to go public with the knowledge that every member of this board supports him in saying, we stand with the president, we stand with Ukraine, and we stand against global aggression now and forever. And with that, I ask an amen and your prayers and thoughts for the people of Ukraine.
Amen. Thank you. So I think the motion to adjourn will be centered around that last sentence, that we pray for our president, we pray for our troops, we pray for the people of Ukraine, and we're against global aggression now and forever.
Amen.
Thank you. A second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Shavella Thomas. Lorraine Johnson. James Lumsden. Steve Beam. Wyndon Hippler.
Thank you for bringing this.
Thank you. We're hereby adjourned.
Thanks for bringing this.